As we move on to another segment of our DASH Takeover, I am excited to introduce Cynthia Henri. And it is really the stories of others that inspire us, that change us, that let us know that we can make it in the midst of storms and valleys. And so, Cynthia, I just want to thank you for your courage to share your story, especially in the month of mental health awareness. And so I believe that your story will really help someone who is tuned in today. So can you kind of share with us a bit of your story?
Yes. So my husband and I have been married for 7 years. And during our fourth, going into our 5th year of marriage, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So that was definitely a shift for the both of us, discovering the different challenges and understanding what the disorder means and what that means for us in our marriage, and how does that look for like therapy and treatment and other avenues that we had to face to like move forward.
And so what was the impetus for the diagnosis? Like, did it just happen out of nowhere? How were you able to deal with it?
Right. So right before the diagnosis, his mom had passed away, and that was definitely the stepping stone for what we now understand as the foundation that led us to get, I would say, to receive help. There were just different changes in mood and different changes in behavior that we decided that he needed to go and talk to a specialist to see a therapist. And through therapy, he was diagnosed, he was evaluated. It took some time. And then different avenues had to come in, and then medication had to be introduced to really help cope with the different ups and downs for the mood.
And what was that like for you? Because you're married, you've been married,
Yeah.
you had been married 4 years, and then, out of the blue, you are now the spouse of someone who has a mental health challenge. How did you cope with that?
So shifting to being a caregiver was definitely different. My husband's the head of the household, so just different avenues for me was, okay, I needed to understand what the disorder was. So I had to research to get more understanding. I knew like the textbook definition, but I didn't know the ins and outs of what it really meant. So I had to do research. I also connected with the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they offer free classes for caregivers. And I took a 12-week class to really understand how I can better be a caregiver for my husband, but so that I can also support him in the needs that he has. And I also had to seek out therapy just for myself, and for us to seek out couples therapy as we navigate the ins and outs. And I felt like all of those tools were really helpful. The organization NAMI really helped because they also offer support groups. So it was cool to be able to connect with other people that were also going through the same thing. And also, while I was learning more about it, I realized how mental illness has a stigma, especially in our community, that people really don't understand. So it's like, while I was educating myself, I also had to educate like my family who didn't know, or just different friends that may interact with him and may not know the different red flags that might show, hey, this might be happening or this might be happening. So having to explain it was really empowering for me, because I'm like, yeah, I get to educate people, and we get to all be a part of something that really affects people more than we know. And I feel like it's something that's not really talked about as much.
What are some of the stigmas that you've had to face, like as a couple and then just as a wife, caring for someone that has a mental health challenge?
I think there's many things. So one of the things I felt like it's almost like, well, I know in my community I grew up Haitian and we don't talk about things. So it's very like you that stays within the family. Like you don't talk about that, don't talk about that, don't talk about that. But in not talking about stuff and saying like, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you're keeping it bottled up inside. And, for me, it was hard for me to like even share with some people what was happening because I was like, do I tell people? Like, or do I not tell people? Like, because it's like, it's people know us and it's hard to explain an absence or to explain, well, how come you're not at this place? Or why are you going to see couples therapy? Like, what's wrong with your marriage? Like, nothing's wrong. And we want to keep it that way. And that's why we're going. I think there's a misconception of needing to talk to someone and a misconception of, oh, you're going to therapy or you're doing this, that means something's wrong. Well, it's like, no, I'm just getting the help and the treatment that I need to prevent a situation to turn into something really catastrophic. So something small. So I feel like a stigma, I think, too, that I feel like is something is like taking medication. Like I feel like there's almost like oh, so you take medication. Like there's almost like this, like, I don't even know the right word, but for me, I think like if someone has like high blood pressure or a heart disease, like you take medication for that. If you have allergies, you take medication for that. So I feel like if you have a mental illness and you're on medication, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you need medication in order to make you function on a day-to-day basis, then I'm for it. So I think those two stigmas like really played a role with us.
Well, again, I just want to commend you on the bravery to tell your story, especially culture, and not just Haitian culture. I feel like it's, Black culture, African American, Cape
Right.
Verdean,
Right.
family culture.
Right, yeah.
That everyone is like, keep this in the family. And a lot of times when you do carry the weight of family secrets, that also sends people into a lot of mental health challenges as well. Because, you want to be free. You want to be able to, with wisdom, tell your story. So now you've gone to NAMI. You've taken classes. You're in couples counseling and you're in counseling, your husband is in counseling. What has been the most challenging thing of, your kind of midpoint marriage, everything shifts, you've got to learn all this information. What has been the most challenging thing for you?
I would say really like taking my role as a caregiver and like not so much now, but in the beginning was making sure that I took care of myself. I think when you're a caregiver, you want to make sure the person you're taking care of is all set. So it's like you almost forget your needs just for a second because your needs, not that you forget about yourself, but it's almost like it's not as important because it's like, well, no, like he needs this and he needs that. Okay, we're going to therapy. Oh, okay, you're meeting with your doctor. Okay, I'm gonna come with you. Oh, you need this. So it's like, I almost forgot about me for a second, that I still needed Cynthia time, that I still needed self-care, that I still needed to, go out and hang out with my friends, that it was okay to do that. And I think I needed to find that within myself, and going to therapy helped me like navigate that. I would say a challenge within the marriage was understanding that trying to separate my husband from the mental illness, that not everything he does is a red flag for bipolar disorder. Like, if he has an idea, I can't be like, oh my gosh, he has an idea, this means that. Like, it's like my brain starts thinking like a million things. And it's just like, so couples therapy has really helped us navigate that, like identifying the characteristics of my husband and then identifying the characteristics of the mental illness, and like separating the two and just being able to see him for who he is has been like, has helped us navigate.
Wow, that's really good, because I know there are people that it may not be their husband, but it could be a family member. It could be a child. It could be anyone.
Right.
How do you navigate, being a caregiver and then being a wife? Because that seems like it's something
Yeah.
like you have to give care and then describe, I know there's this term caregiver, but describe what a caregiver's role is.
Yeah. So I would say the role of a caregiver is making sure that person with the mental illness is keeping up with their doctor's appointments, is keeping up with their medications, but you're also keeping track of their moods, because the goal is you want to make sure that person is as balanced as possible. So they're as close to their traditional personality as possible. So when you're a caregiver, you're responsible for noticing red flags that if that person is going through, you notice their behavior is a little different, then I'm going to need to seek additional help, meaning this person may or may not have to go to a psychiatric facility. This person may have to go to see another therapist. And really, being a caregiver is also advocating for that person when they can't advocate for themselves. Because sometimes when you're in a mental illness, if you're going through something where you're so depressed where you can't get out of bed, it's really hard sometimes to advocate for yourself, So, the caregiver, me, I advocate for that person. Like, no, listen, I know that, you're saying that the medication is okay, but this person's depressed right now, and they've been depressed for a very long time. So maybe the medication isn't working. But if they're really depressed, they might not even be able to have the motivation to even call their therapist, to even say anything, to even get the adjustments on their medication. So it's really like helping them be the best version of themselves is like the role of the caregiver. And I'm grateful that I'm in this position, because I think about people who don't have caregivers, and I don't know how you navigate the mental illness journey without someone by your side to help you. Like, there are times where, like, we have a family calendar and all of the appointments are in our calendar, and I'm like, hey, remember, we have this appointment, and sometimes I go with him and sometimes I don't. There's a level of kind of knowing when he needs that extra support, Also, being a caregiver is recognizing that there are seasons where that person's mood may change. So I know there are certain points of the year that I'm like, this is gonna be a really hard month for him. So I need to make sure that I'm available for him for that emotional support. In terms of navigating it as a wife, I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm not gonna lie. Because I don't want to mommy my husband. I still want to respect him as the head of the household. I still, want to be that emotional support for him as a wife. There are times where him and I do have an agreement where it's called LTTW, and it's listen to your wife. And when I pull the listen to your wife card, typically it works. Like, okay, all right, she's trying to help me out. She's trying to help me out. Like, come on, just hear out what I'm saying, because, you don't see it right now, but let's just, So I think that is how we navigate it. But honestly, couples therapy has really helped us to communicate better, because sometimes when someone does have like a mental illness and you're speaking, depending on where they are, they really might not understand what you're saying. Like, you could say blah, 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 and they might translate it as something else because their senses might be heightened. So they're seeing what you're saying in a whole different way. So being able to learn different words to say and words not to say during those times has been really helpful and helped us navigate it.
What would you say to the women that are listening, if they have a friend that is in a similar position, what can they do to support their friend? 'Cause sometimes, I mean, I know you know this, that sometimes people support you like in a way that they think is helpful. And so I think kind of hearing from someone that is in the situation might be helpful.
I would say listen to the friend as they vent and validate what they're saying and validate their pain. Because sometimes when someone is having like a rough day to person A isn't a rough day to person B. So if the person's like, I had the worst day ever and I can't get a haircut, and as trivial as that sounds, that might sound like the most ridiculous thing, but to that person, like for someone who has a mental illness and their senses are heightened, that could honestly be the worst day of their life, is that they don't have a haircut. So to say, please, like, you don't have a haircut, like there are other things, like that is not what that person needs to hear. So just validating it, like, wow, okay, yeah, I understand that's really hard, like, and just allow them to get it out and express themselves, and then try to provide a solution if you can. But there are some things that they might say that there might not be a solution for, and if they say something that's like beyond you, that you can handle, then recommend that, they do seek counsel, that they do like talk to their therapist. And if they don't have one, there are so many resources out there available where you can find one. Definitely, I would say go to the National Alliance of Mental Illness website, and they can connect you with help. There's different sites in different cities, different towns, different states, so they can help.
So in your particular case, when you recognize that, something wasn't right with your husband, like what did you do?
So the first thing I do when I notice the heightened mood is leading either to mania or the depression is dipping a little too low, is I call the crisis team. A lot of states and cities have them. I think Boston calls it the best team. They might be called something different. So automatically, since his diagnosis, we have a medical kit at home, and it has all of his entire medical history, any medication he's ever been on, family history, everything is ready in a file by the door. So that if we have to go somewhere and they're asking questions, they ask so many questions in like a second that you're just like, I don't have time to go through my brain trying to figure it out. I'm like, here's his file. And I just have it. But the crisis team will ask you different questions, and they can evaluate whether this person just needs to just talk to someone, or if they do need to be taken into a psychiatric facility. And it's cool that that resource is available. And also, some of them will have like stabilization units, so that they don't necessarily have to be taken to a hospital. They just need a place to sleep for a second because they're really heightened, and they need a place free from distraction to just relax a bit. Yeah. So the first thing that I do is I call them, and then I call my mentors for emotional support for me and some of my friends, just so that it can be overwhelming a little bit when you see someone that you really care about not acting like themselves. It can be scary because you're like, oh, I don't know what's happening. Right. So the very first time I didn't know what was going on, like I was scared, not scared like, I can't describe the word. I feel like scared isn't the word, but I was just like, I don't know what's wrong. Like something's wrong. So just not knowing what it was at the time, because we didn't know that it was bipolar disorder. I just knew like something's happening here.
And so with the current situation that we're in, COVID-19 and the whole pandemic, what has that been like for someone with a mental health challenge?
Yeah, so the frequent news updates is really, it's a lot. I did mention that if someone has a mental illness, that their senses are heightened. So any bit of information that's released to maybe, someone who doesn't have a mental illness might take that in and just kind of just take it, receive it, and just like, oh, okay, whatever. But if you're like really, if you have if you suffer from like anxiety, it's only going to make you more anxious. If you're depressed, it's going to make you more depressed. So it's like, a lot of the news that we're hearing isn't good news. Like it's really sad, and taking that in, and your outlets of escape have been taken away from you.
Right.
So you're not able to go to the gym or go to a restaurant or hang out with your friends. So it's like you're stuck at home and you're hearing all this bad news, and it can be really overwhelming. So I definitely say if you know someone that, has a mental illness, I would definitely say check in with them to make sure they're really good, because this has affected us in so many ways. I even felt anxious a few times, and I was like, I have to turn off my phone because this is just a lot for me. And I haven't been diagnosed with a mental illness. It was just a lot for me.
Right. So as we come to a close, you talked a lot about what we can do to help someone that has a challenge, a mental health challenge. And I definitely loved how you said if someone has like diabetes or high blood pressure, it's kind of like it's acceptable that they take medication. And, I definitely am a believer in if someone has a mental health challenge, that they work with a team of people to see like where their levels are off.
Yeah.
And definitely we as a church are proponents of making sure that people get like therapy, check-ins, the same way you get, a physical every year. Most health insurances allow you to have 6 visits
Right.
to a therapist just for a mental health check-in. There's all kinds of stuff going on in our lives.
Yep.
And sometimes you just need a neutral voice just to kind of sound off on. But how, as we close, how do we, how do friends and family help the caregiver?
Yes. So definitely, I love my friends and family. I cling on to them. So they help me in times of almost like providing a distraction. So like making me laugh. I love to laugh. And just being that support and not judging the situation. So just knowing that I can call like my sister at any point in time, and she's just like, hey, whatever you need. The other day, actually, she just sent me a box of popcorn. And I was like, yes, and it was just something so like, why are you so excited your sister sent you popcorn? I'm like, because she knows what I'm going through, and she's just awesome. So just even if you don't have the words to say, they don't have to say anything. Just being a presence is just everything for me. And they offer like prayer, which is huge, and I can feel them. So it's definitely helpful for me when the friends and family just reach out.
So as we come to a close, what are, so you said you have therapy for yourself, you have couples therapy, and you mentioned NAMI a lot, the National Association of
Mental illness.
Mental illness. When you took those classes and all of the other things that you mentioned, are all of those things steps that have helped you kind of carry the load?
Yes. So the NAMI group provided a support group, and the support group, it just so happened that the group, everyone, there was 6 of us, and everyone was a caregiver for someone that had bipolar disorder, which doesn't normally happen. You're normally mixed in with different, like whether it's schizophrenia or depression, anxiety, whatever. So, that having the support group was awesome, because although I had my friends and family, it's cool to connect with someone that's also like, I am a caregiver and they also have this and this is what's going on. So it was cool to be able to connect, to know like the emotions that I feel inside. Like I'm not the only one going through it. Because sometimes when you're a caregiver, you can almost feel alone. Like there's no one to connect to. Like I can't vent everything that I'm feeling out to my husband as I'm emotionally supporting him. There's levels sometimes where I have to understand that he's not going to be able to support me emotionally at that point in time, depending on what it is. And I have to be okay with that. So it's like in those seasons, I need that emotional support somewhere. So having that support group was very helpful. Having my friends and family is helpful. Having God as my anchor is like everything. So that helps.
So I just again thank you for your transparency, and I know that this conversation is a support to so many people that are tuned in that are battling it either publicly or privately. And the one thing that I hope people, really gain from this conversation is that it's important to get help.
Yeah.
And it's important to have support. And that if you're a person that knows someone, that you can help love them through the situation that they found themselves in. And also to be patient and to just be aware of, family or friends that, you may sense a shift in their personality. So thank you. It's National Mental Health Awareness Month. And, but really we need to be aware of mental health every single month of the year.
Right.
This is just the month that it's like, enlightened, but it is something that really plagues our community, and we don't talk about it enough. So thank you again, and this is her story from the DASH Takeover.